I'm David Shriner-Cahn, host of the podcast Smashing the Plateau and president of Tend Strategic Partners. Coming up on Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty show, I'm going to talk about how you as a leader can smash the plateau, because we all know leadership is lonely. So stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to be looking at how there's a ceiling that we must all break through. It's not the traditional glass ceiling that we often think about women bumping into. No, this one is far more ubiquitous. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. If you're a regular, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. And with over 2 million listeners and downloads, we're honored to be and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. Thank you for sharing the show with everyone that you know. Listen, there are over 1 million podcasts out there, thousands of them focused on either business or leadership, but there is only one show that focuses on what's at the heart and the soul of business and leadership, and you are tuned into it right here, right now with me, Dov Baron. So remember, we always need your help in staying relevant, so get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Like I said at the opening there's this ceiling we got to break through. It's not the usual glass ceiling we talk about with women. So what is it? Well, let me give you a simple example. Have you ever been on a diet? Your goal was to lose a certain amount of weight, and you work really, really hard, and you lose it all except for the last 10 pounds. Why is that? What is that personal ceiling? Well, you have hit a plateau. Our guest today is David Shriner-Cahn. David is the host of the business podcast, Smashing the Plateau. I am honored to be a guest on there. It's a great show. I highly recommend that you tune into it. The show is the resource for business leaders who feel that they've stalled. David has interviewed over 300 guests, including Ric Edelman, Gretchen Rubin, and many others, over 300, like I said, including Gary Vaynerchuk. With the perspective and that prosperity can be created when we have the right mindset and tools to share our gifts with the world. Smashing the Plateau offers a wealth of personal experience about achieving business breakthroughs. David is also the president of Tend Strategic Partners. David works with business leaders who need to get unstuck from the mid-career plateau where they may be in danger of losing the very spark that helped them to succeed. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome David Shriner-Cahn. And the crowd goes wild. Welcome, David. Good to have you here.
Thanks so much, Dov. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm honored to have you on, man. And this let's start right where we are our intro. Let's talk about this ceiling. Every one of us has had that experience where things are chugging along, they're going really great, and we hit this plateau. So let's talk about what that is at the first level. Is it simply a self-sabotage, or is it something else altogether?
Well, first of all, I love your example about weight loss, because that's a great example. And anyone who's been on a diet knows exactly what you're talking about. You have your objective of how much you're trying to lose, and very often you don't quite get there. And for some reason, whether it's 10% of the way or 90% of the way, you get to a certain weight and it just doesn't seem to change.
You got it.
And I find that is true in all aspects of business and life. we have particular goals in mind. We may have short-term objectives in mind, and we work really hard to try to achieve them. And for some strange reason, something happens that keeps us from getting to where we want to go. It keeps us from getting where we want to go fast enough. The way I describe it in a business situation, if you are particularly, and I purposely describe this as something that often happens mid-career. If you look ahead at what you dream to achieve before your working story ends, and you see where you are now, there's going to be a gap, right? Yep. Particularly anybody who's in a leadership role. Leaders are high achievers.
Absolutely.
So, right. So whatever our goals are, we've achieved a certain amount, and we dream to get to some other level, and that gap may not be closing fast enough. And if you're mid-career, you realize more than you do when you might be 20 or 25, that the clock is ticking. We know that time is finite, and so we want that gap to close faster. And unfortunately, our media, in particular social media, makes it seem like our colleagues and our competitors are achieving breakthroughs left, right, and center and leaving us in the dust. And
yeah, well, let's face it, everybody's career is now on social media, but not the struggle, not the strife, just the achievements. And it's very natural psychologically for us to compare ourselves.
Exactly.
And that, of course, brings that up.
Right. So what social media doesn't tell us is that in order for someone to suddenly achieve 25% market share in that sector, the person has worked endlessly for 10 years and struggled at 1 or 2% market share, and then all the pieces started to come together within a year or two, and suddenly things are moving forward, and the company is outpacing its competitors. Right? That's one example.
So again, what do you think it is? Do you think it's self-sabotage? What do you think it is that creates that plateau for us?
Well, it's different I think it's different for every individual. That's what I found. So for some people, if you look at how a company grows, initially a company is somebody's idea, right? Very often it's one person. And that person tries to get the idea off the ground. The person gets the idea off the ground. Initially, one person is the primary person in everything in the business. Marketing, sales, operations, customer service. And if the concept is working well and customers are buying, at some point, in order to grow, you need to start relying on other people to be part of the team.
Absolutely.
For some people, that's really hard because it's your baby. You've created it. Nobody's going to do it like you. Yet if there's customer demand, how do you meet the customer demand? The only way you can do it is by bringing other people into the process. So often that will initially happen with a handful of maybe part-time people. It's like a business generally will have an accountant and an attorney before anything else. Because most people don't have the skill set, and there are also certain legal requirements that must be met in order for whatever accountants and attorneys do that individual entrepreneurs can't do. Then as the business grows, it gets to the point where you might have a handful of employees, or maybe even a dozen, 15 employees, and you get to the point where as the business owner, again, assuming that it's one person, this could also happen if they're partners, you get to the point where you can't supervise all the people who are in your team adequately, and you need to be able to start to develop a management layer. Right. Well, that's another whole set of skills that as the CEO, you need to have.
Right.
And you need to be able to train them to be managers, et cetera. So every time you go through one of these shifts in the business scale, there are different skill sets that are required internally. So there are many internal issues as a company grows. And of course, there are external factors. The market can change. It's like, look what's happened in the last 10, 15, 20 years, there's so many markets that have been turned upside down. Look what happened when Airbnb started, when Uber started, when iTunes started. They disrupted whole industries. What you and I are doing right now couldn't be done 15, 20 years ago.
Absolutely not.
You and I are now in the media business. We're competing with the media giants.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I have a very good friend who's part of that world, and he said, do you know that you get more views of your show on average than a CNBC news show does? I'm like, what? Because in my brain, it's like, I want to be there, but really, they want the kind of numbers that you and I are getting for our shows.
Exactly.
Because, like you said, we're in the media world now, and so there is all this disruption. But is that what creates the plateau, or is it I know what I think, but I want to know what you think. Do you think that that's the mindset? It's the mindset that creates it? Because the truth is that I think we're in a hyper situation of disruption. I believe that we're in a greatest change environment since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. There's no doubt about that in my mind. However, I think there's always been Luddites. There's always been people who are hanging on to the past and saying, I don't want to change. And that's got nothing to do with technology, whatever that technology is, whether that technology is the printing press or podcasting, and they want to hold on to the past. It's that mindset. Do you when you're working with your clients, you're working with the people that you serve, are you finding that it's a mindset thing, or is it something else altogether?
I would say actually I would describe it as a combination of mindset and emotion. Now, you might include emotion as part of the mindset, but the emotional component is a big one.
So tell us the distinction for you, because that's an important piece.
Well, the mindset, I think you've really touched on the mindset, which is we're in an age of disruption. We're in an age of acceleration, due in large part to technology. There have been some great resources out that talk about this.
Yeah, of course.
Tom Friedman came out with a book last year where he outlines what's going on. He, in fact, identifies 2007 as a pivot year in terms of the acceleration, and many things all of a sudden changed rather rapidly following 2007. That was the year that the iPhone came out, which we know was a major disruption. And he outlined some other things in the book. Ric Edelman, who just published The Truth About Your Future, who is one of the most successful financial advisors in the United States, who I've had the pleasure of having on my show twice. It's a remarkable book that he spent 7 years researching. Also talks about how technology is creating all kinds of disruptions. He outlines 100+ professions that he believes will disappear within a relatively short period of time. And so, the Luddites who are holding on to the past, and one example that he uses is self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are becoming a reality. They are likely to become the dominant reality. So what does that mean here? And one of the obvious ones is parking garages and parking garage attendants as a profession, because if you have a self-driving car, it doesn't need to get parked. Insurance, auto insurance will change because people won't need to insure their own cars anymore.
No.
And another one that he identifies is chiropractors, because they get most of their business due to auto accidents. So it's
that's a fascinating one. I would not have thought of that.
That is the one I thought of. So being able to understand that these disruptions are here to stay and they are likely to become more frequent means that we need to be, as leaders, we need to be nimble and understand that, and particularly if you're running big organizations, right, which is your audience, big organizations have a really hard time changing quickly. Right. And as we've seen, especially in the last 10 years, the disruptions come from the small ones, the upstarts, that can change on a dime.
Absolutely.
So as a leader, how do you prepare your people to be able to respond to an outside threat quickly? So that to me is a mindset issue.
Right.
The emotional piece is people are inherently, I think, very resistant to change, and they're very fearful of what may happen because of change. And what I've seen is kind of two things. One is obviously fear of failure, especially for people who have had successes, which is why I like to focus on people who are mid-career and above. So if you take somebody who's 45, 50, 55, to get where they are today, if they're in a leadership role, they've had successes. And yes, they've probably had failures too, because we all know that success is not a linear progression. There are ups and downs.
Right.
Yet, the longer we're in business and the more successes we have, the more we become fearful of failures because we know what the consequences might be. So they're fearful of the negative things that might happen due to change, and they're also fearful of losing the success that they've already created. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. And if you've hit a plateau where you've already had some success, but now you're stuck, you're fearful that you're going to decline more, or maybe the world around you is going to achieve more and leave you behind. So you're going to fall behind based on past successes, yet especially if you've tried tactics that haven't worked out so well, then you are fearful that the next thing you try is just going to be worse, right? Like
this is the thing, right? Because, and I think this is what people don't really grasp, is that, of course, we all understand it's far easier to be to embrace risk when you're young. But as you get older and as you get more successful, your lifestyle also changes. And as your lifestyle changes, so does your investment in that lifestyle. So now taking a risk when you were 22 and you were sleeping on your mate's couch, no biggie. You know, my mate might kick me out and I go find another buddy and I'll sleep on his couch. Versus now I own the 3-story house in downtown Manhattan and I've got my kids in private school. You know, and I don't want the embarrassment of having to sell my Mercedes and downtrade to a Lexus. You know, that would just be too embarrassing. So I'm not going to take the risk. And you know, we know that this is this teeter-totter balance between these two things, because if you don't take the risk, then you fall behind the disruption, fall behind the technology, you fall behind the advancement. And if you take too big a risk, then it's the other side, and oh my God, can I pay the mortgage, and can my kids continue to go to private school? So that is for me, what I see in the leaders is that's the psychological challenge that creates the anxiety, because both sides of that curve have anxiety on them. The anxiety of I'm going to get left behind, and the anxiety of, oh my God, the lifestyle's going away. And if my wife can't go out and buy a new Coach handbag for $40,000, well, maybe she'll leave me. I mean, whatever it is. It's so how do we get them? How do you get them through that plateau? How do you get them to step into that? What are some of your methodologies that allow people to smash through the plateau?
Well, one of the methodologies is to obviously you need to get somebody to help you. You really can't do this by yourself.
So let's stop for a minute, because I want everybody to just get that, because I think that is like so simple and so easy to go, whatever. But you know, I've told this story many, many times on the show that my lesson in 1989 that I learned from Tony Robbins when I met him in person, and he asked me who was on my team, and I said I don't play soccer anymore, because I didn't understand that term. If you don't have a team, if you don't have, you know, you may be good at a lot of things, but you're not going to be great at everything. And that willingness to go, I need somebody, not just to help me, but somebody who has that external perspective. You know, like you and I as consultants, David, our advantage is we don't have the bias inside of the company. And so we have a different view. This is why it's our specialty. And I think so often being in that position of leader, of course, it has an ego presence to it. And a lot of leaders feel shameful about calling David or calling Dov and saying, I need help. But these are the people who break through. Wouldn't you agree that that's the first thing you got to get, is you got to climb over your own ego in order to break through the plateau?
Very much so. And in today's world, where command and control leadership no longer works, the more vulnerable you let yourself be, the better your chances are to overcome those plateaus. And I know you talk a lot about this in what you do. And it's humbling, it's scary, yet it's really powerful. It's like I do a lot of networking in my business. And one of the things that I've noticed with people who are really successful at networking, they're really good at asking for help. They're really good at saying, this is exactly what I need, and I would be so grateful if you can help me find this.
Yep, absolutely.
So being able to ask for help is huge. And it doesn't have to be a consultant. There are lots of different ways you can get help, but you can't really do this by yourself, because if you're stuck, you're not the one who's going to be able to probe and unearth what's not working right. Somebody else can ask you those questions. And sometimes it's as simple as just somebody asking you a lot of questions.
And the interesting thing is, and I know you know this as well as I do, is that sometimes I'm brought in, you're brought in, and we're asking questions, and the person on the other side, the leader on the other side says, yeah, I've thought about that. But that's, they've asked themselves the same question, but they haven't allowed themselves to fully answer. But Correct. When you sit in front of an expert, in front of a consultant, in front of somebody who that is their focus, you're not going to let that person off the hook. They're going to have to dive in, and they have to go there. And that's part of why they shy away, because it's it's much easier to have that stuff in your head than it is to actually let it out with somebody. And because then we're going to face, okay, so what is the real challenge? What do we need to do?
Right. So another great mechanism for getting help is a peer support group.
Absolutely.
And as we know, many people who are really successful leaders have spent most of their careers in various kinds of peer support groups. And a peer support group is not a bunch of people getting together and having a gripe session periodically. A peer support...
Oh, come on, let's have a once-a-month bitch session.
Yeah, well, it might make you feel better, but it's probably not going to solve your problems.
No, definitely not going to solve your problems. So this is the thing. When this person, this leader, is at that plateau, let's say they're brave enough to say, okay, I'm kind of stuck. I'm at a plateau. I'd like to break through. They crawl over the broken glass of their own ego and say, okay, I need help. One of the questions that comes up for them is, how do I know where to go? There are peer groups, but are they really my peers? There are consultants, but there are also a lot of, let's just say, snake oil salesmen. There are, so there are all kinds of justifications for not doing it, even though the person may have decided that they're going to do it. Help us to help them sort out the way to find a good resource or resources.
Well, sure. It's a great question. And yes, you're right. In today's world, there's been an explosion of people, for example, who call themselves business coaches. Mm-hmm. And there's no barrier to entry. Anybody can hang up a shingle and say, I'm a business coach.
Right.
Does that mean that I really am a business coach? That I can coach people? No. So some of the things you would want to look at with anybody you're going to bring in for help, whether it's a coach, a consultant, whether you're looking to join a peer support group, is, first of all, commonality of values.
Absolutely.
That's really important. I would say that's one of the most important things. I don't want to invest my time hanging around with people who don't share my values. Mm-hmm. Right? So, as an example, I believe strongly in integrity. I believe strongly in leaving the world a better place than I found it. I think that's part of our mission on this earth. Not everybody feels that way.
Nope.
I believe in giving first and having a mindset of abundance and reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody believes that. Not everybody acts that way.
No.
And you can tell and you can ask somebody who is potentially going to help you, again, whether it's a coach, a consultant, peer support group, or whatever. You can ask questions about, and particularly ask questions about their experiences facing similar kinds of situations, because the stories about the experiences will tell you a lot. Mm-hmm. Much more so than whatever jargon they're going to tell you about the service that they offer. I think experiences and stories are the most revealing about somebody's values. Let them tell you a story about how they may have faced something where they didn't know what the solution was. How did they deal with it? How did they smash their own plateaus?
Right.
Often, peer support group doesn't need to be people. If you're a CEO of a large company, it doesn't have to be a group of CEOs of large companies. I had a guest on my show who's been part of a standalone mastermind group for 7 years.
Right.
And he said there are people in the group who range from an entrepreneur running multiple multi-million-dollar companies to a part-time practitioner delivering a service. And he said very often it's the part-time practitioner delivering the service who asks the best questions of the people running the multi-million-dollar companies. In a peer support group, it's all about, besides the values, it's got to be a culture of trust, culture of confidentiality, culture of not giving advice but sharing experiences. And I would say, there's a fine line between trying to use questioning to unearth what's really going on that is that's causing a plateau, and giving advice, and somebody who can probe and can really unearth why you're where you are.
Yeah.
The truth is, you probably have the best idea of the solutions. You just are afraid to get started.
Sure.
Right. So somebody who is a really careful listener, who can ask the right questions, is probably the best to get you started. And again, people in a group can be trained to behave that way with their colleagues. Not every group works that way. A lot of them don't. So you got to be careful.
Sure.
And the same thing with coaches and consultants. Good coaches and consultants ask really careful, pointed questions.
Yeah, it's a skill that many people are mediocre to quite good at, but very few are exceptional at. And I would, like yourself, I would highly recommend that you find somebody who can ask you the questions that will make you uncomfortable. If they're asking you a question that you're comfortable with, you're with the wrong person. We have a term for them. They're smoke blowers. Bend over, they're going to blow smoke up your skirt. It's not really about getting to what it is. And you need also, the other side of that is you need to have the courage. We're back to the emotion and the mindset, but you need to have the courage to be willing to be asked those questions. I myself have several people who I go to who, I'm the king of asking uncomfortable questions, but that doesn't mean I don't need it. Of course I need others who can do that to me. And I've got some amazing people who will ask me questions that make me want to crawl out of my own skin. And those, as uncomfortable as they are, those are the best questions. So let's flip it on you for a moment and ask you, what is a problem or a challenge that you're currently working on in your own business? And, what are you facing the challenges with? Where are you trying to break through the plateau?
It's a great question. And, you mentioned that I'm the host of the podcast, Smashing the Plateau. We're now we've had about 300 episodes out, and we've been doing this now for 3 years. As of the date of this recording, we're just coming up on the end of the third year of recording. So clearly there's some success there. Mm-hmm. We've had great guests. You and I have met as a result.
Yep.
We get good feedback from our listeners. So what's next? Mm-hmm. What's next as a result of that? And one of the things that we started doing last year is events that are tied to the podcast community, which is a new thing for us. Mm-hmm. And with any new thing, like anybody else, I was scared about what would happen launching the first one. Would anybody be interested? Would anybody come? And I was pleased that actually people did come, and they wanted to come back for a second one. So we launched a second one, and we had more people, and we got some feedback. We made some tweaks about the program, and then we launched a third one. So now we're at the point of planning the fourth. And one of the things that I'm struggling with as the podcast host and the owner of my own business is, okay, so now we're starting to create a community. So what?
Right.
I have my own ideas about what the purpose is. How do we create something that is valuable for everybody who attends, who raises the bar for all of them, helps them smash whatever plateaus they have, even if it's an incremental amount by coming to a small event? And how does that support our business? Because it's got to be a two-way street.
Sure.
And so we're right in the midst of trying to deal with this. And as a matter of fact, as of the date of this recording, earlier today, I was with a team of people where I let my hair down and shared some of my own vulnerabilities about where we are with the business, with these events, with the podcast, to try to get some feedback from some people that I know, like, and trust. And hopefully it will give me some ideas about what our next steps should be.
Well, I love to hear that, a man who is following his own advice. You're buying your own product. That's good to hear. That's fabulous to hear. In order to get to the level of success that you are at, you have no doubt had certain beliefs that you've had to let go of. Tell us a belief that you maybe had that was implanted, that was carried around with you for a long time, that you looked at and went, you know what, I got to move past that. What would be an example of that? Because I think there's so often a belief is the plug in the plateau. You know, you pull it out. What would be an example of one of those beliefs for you?
Well, an early belief that I had in my career was the belief that that I was supposed to be trained in a profession where I would go to work for somebody, mm-hmm. and that somebody would take care of me for my working career, and then I would retire and collect a pension.
Yeah. Well, how's that going? How's that going for you and the rest of America?
That went out the window when I was 27 and got fired from my second job because there wasn't enough business. By the way, it was a month after I got a great performance review and a big raise.
There you go.
Right? So it wasn't particularly logical from my perspective,
no.
But from the owner of the company, it was pretty logical. He didn't have enough customers, and he had to let half of his staff go.
Right. That's, and that's, I think that, that is not only a belief, but a reality that so many, as you said, mid-career individuals have got to face. I think that, when we entered the workforce in our age bracket, we thought it was many people. I was never that guy. I was always an entrepreneur, but many people entered the corporate world believed that they were entering into a lifetime career that was going to last 20 to 40 years, followed by the gold watch and the golden handshake, or and the retirement party. I mean that people talking about retirement parties. I've actually had that conversation with people who are 35 and under, and they're like, what do you mean? I mean, I might as well be describing some ancient Aztec ritual. I mean, it's like, retirement party? Is that a real thing? but it was so much part of a generation that is now gone. And I think it's a really important belief that so many of us have got to face. You know, in what you've been sharing today, what would you say is the number one most practical thing that our C-suite leaders or even our high-level entrepreneurs who are watching, listening, what would you say is the number one most practical thing about what it is you shared that you want them to get?
Get help. Get help when you need. No, seriously, get help when you need. And there's something, there's a part two to this that we didn't talk about. And I'll just say very briefly, the second part is be really careful about your implementation process, because so many leaders and companies don't implement a new effort long enough to see positive results. And if you think about business and life, they're iterative processes.
Yes.
We create a plan, we take the first step, we measure the results, learn from the results, modify the plan, take the next step.
Right.
And if you think about how anybody who has created a major breakthrough, what they've done, they've had probably hundreds of those small steps, if not thousands of them. And we've seen too many companies that will have 63 change initiatives going on at the same time. Mm-hmm. You can't focus on 63. If you're lucky, you can focus on 2 or 3 at the same time.
Right.
So really think about what is your primary one that you want to work on. Think about what are those steps to get started, measure the results, learn from the results, improve for the next step, and take the next step, and just keep at it. And make sure that you keep your people who are part of this on track, that they're doing this day in, day out, week in, week out. It's not a process where you look at it once every 6 months. You really have to check in on this once a week.
Right.
So that's the other piece that I would say to your listeners.
Yeah.
Don't be fuzzy about the implementation.
You know, thinking about a lot of our listeners, our viewers are what we call next-gen leaders. So they're the leaders who are about to step into those major roles. Is that advice, do you feel like that's the same advice for them, or do you feel like there's something a little bit different for them who are stepping into that high-level position? They're at the beginning of it. So they're probably between 35 and 50, and they're going to step up into the big position.
Make sure that you have a system for yourself to keep yourself learning. Be a lifelong learner. That's really important. Yeah. And most people that I know who are major leaders spend a lot of time reading, listening to podcasts, studying, seeing what other people are doing. And the interesting thing about it, and this is one other benefit of being in a peer support group, very often an innovative idea will come from somebody in a totally different sector that all of a sudden you'll hear somebody else's experience, you go, oh, I can try that in the problem I'm facing right now. Yeah. And it might be just the thing I need. Yeah, exactly. So keep learning, keep trying. Just keep learning.
So from your point of view, if you had to boil it down, what is at the very soul of leadership, the very soul of business? I realize that that's probably not a question you are generally asked on podcasts or even interviews, but from your point of view, what is at the very soul of leadership?
As a leader, you're responsible for communicating passion to everybody who's around you. That includes your employees, your consultants, your customers, the media. Your major job is communication. And in today's world, with all these gadgets that we have, communication just keeps getting worse and worse and worse.
Right.
So I would say learn how to be a number one communicator.
That's vitally important. So sort of finishing up here, I want to ask you, if you're going to get one thing, and it's always a small thing, one thing put on your gravestone, what would it be?
David made a difference in this world.
If you got to pick what kind of difference, what would it be?
Enabled other people to generate greater success and happiness.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. It's been great having you on. Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you and what it is that you do, and about your podcast and about the services that you offer.
Great, thank you. So they can check out our website. It's tendstrategicpartners.com, TEND, like farming, you're tending a field, tendstrategicpartners.com. They can check out our podcast, Smashing the Plateau. Go to iTunes, search for Smashing the Plateau. You'll see it there. You can also get the episodes on our website. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm probably the only David Shriner-Cahn in the world. It should be pretty easy to find. Dove and I are connected, so you can go to Dove's profile and search for me there. And I'd be very happy to connect with any of your listeners that's looking to smash the plateau.
Fabulous. I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you here. And I encourage each of you to get over there to tendstrategicpartners.com, have a look. And of course, go check out the podcast, Smashing the Plateau, on iTunes. Get yourself over there. And like I said, David has phenomenal guests on there. And by the time this show comes out, I will have already been on the show, so you can go to there and find me on there if you want to.
Yes, you can.
If you're not sick of listening to me after this, you can go there. I want to thank David for being on the show. Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, Dove. Pleasure.
And to you, please remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing even the most successful companies is somewhat counterintuitive. The fastest growing companies are often hit with the realization that they're spending a fortune on attracting, training, and developing talent, and then they're losing them at an incredibly fast rate. So if you're sick of investing in training and development for your talent only to have them leave you before you've got a return on your investment, then come over and talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization. With our assistance, you can reduce your employee turnover by as much as 80% in as little as 120 days, thus evaporating those horrendous costs wasted on training and development. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Remember, get yourself over to matrix.fullmontyleadership.com and you can get your Authentic Leadership Matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $197. You get it absolutely free for being a regular tuned-in listener, so please share the show with everybody else. Until next time, this is Dov Baron saying, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about what it is that you need to just step outside of that plateau. Until next time, this is Dov Baron. I'm out.